And when you said that, I thought of this guy who came from my Airbnb experience. Full-on Trump supporter. Said the N-word in my presence. But then sat down to eat and was, like, ecstatic. I mean, there was a smile on his face. We did have a conversation about why he couldn't say that. But, you know, it was just like in the moment, I was like, ooh, this is unsafe. This is not someone I want to be with. But the minute we started talking about food, the whole thing changed. And then I was able to have a moment of, like, education.
We're here in the live room at Well Said Media in Ithaca, New York, and our guest today is a popular vendor at the Ithaca Farmers Market serving West African plant-based food. She also travels around the Finger Lakes and beyond for catering and cooking classes. Please welcome Chef Kuukua Yomekpe of Asempe Kitchen. How's it going, Chef Kuukua?
It's going great.
Thank you so much for coming on to our podcast today and into this studio. I'm really excited to get into conversation today. I want to start out with, you know, you're from Ghana originally, and I'm very interested in what sparked your interest in cooking and preparing food initially.
Initially, it was because my nanny, the woman who helped my grandma raise us, was very passionate about what she cooked for us. And she cooked her meal separately from us. So she would cook for us, and then she'd disappear and go fix her own thing in the back. And so my sister and I kind of crawled out there one night and was like, what are you doing? And tasted it and thought, okay, this is what we want and not the thing you're creating for us. Which I guess in a way was kind of like, my grandma was British. And so everything it was still African. It was still a Ghanaian meal, but it was very formal. There wasn't a lot of, you know, certain things in it. And so she would do like the very traditional ethnic dishes from her particular ethnic group. So I was just interested in what she was doing that was different from what we were eating. And so she kind of got me started. And so she would teach me little things in the kitchen. My grandma was less patient. I love her to death. God rest her soul. But she was not a very patient woman. So Auntie Mercy is the name of my my nanny. And she was quite patient with us. And so she let us experiment, mess up things, waste veggies, you know, that kind of stuff. So she's the one who kind of got me interested in cooking and experimenting and that kind of stuff.
On that first time where you and your sibling, you said?
My sister.
Your sister snuck in to see what your nanny was cooking. What was she cooking that made you so interested?
My favorite dish. Okay, so let me not lie. My favorite dish is okra. Okay? Okra all day and the slimy gumbo kind. Like soupy and just yummy.
Like what you have at the
market? No, not as the market is geared towards people who don't like okra, so
Okay.
It's not slimy. So I use a frozen okra so that it doesn't turn slimy.
Okay.
At home, I use the fresh okra because it gets slimy, and that's how I was raised. That's what I was raised on. So that's my favorite dish. What Auntie Mercy was cooking that night is called abom. So abom is a very ethnic dish, a traditional dish to an ethnic group in Ghana, mostly like a Twi Akan group. And it's basically fresh taro leaves, sort of mashed up with palm oil and tilapia and boiled egg. And see, look at you. You're excited too.
I'm so hungry. I haven't had lunch. I want this right now.
It was amazing. And we had just, you know, it was like, wow, all these things in the same bowl. And then she had boiled plantains and boiled yams with it. And we were just in heaven. We were just like, oh my God, we can have this on the side. So yeah, that's what she was making. And it was just, we had never had it. And
What did she make for everybody else?
So there's a version of this dish that is actually sort of more mainstream, which is called kontomre, or what we at market called egusi. So it's the same thing, except it's not cooked in red oil. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It doesn't have tilapia. It's a little different. So it's cooked to almost a stew versus what she was making was just a fresh taro leaf situation that was just like right out of steam, right out of, and then the oil was just kind of drizzled on top. It was divine.
Wow. So it's not like either choices were bad.
No. It's not. One was more attractive and different, right? So I think as children, difference is really important for us. Like, this isn't what we had on our dining table. What is this, right? So there's an attraction to something that's different versus the sort of mainstream, we had this last week kind of feeling, Yeah.
And that is what sort of jump-started your creativity and curiosity in preparing food.
Yes, absolutely. She did a brilliant job with us.
So then when did you decide, moving forward, that it was something that you wanted to pursue as a career?
So, oh my goodness, this is backtracking. So let's see, 2012, so 11 years ago, I was in Berkeley doing my master's, and I was broke, right? Berkeley's really expensive. I'd taken out the max amount of student loans. I was really struggling. So I started cooking. And it was mostly just on a whim. I know how to cook. I love cooking. I love having people over. So I started cooking, and I started doing cooking classes, and it just took off. And people were like, yes, let's do this. Come over, So I started that, and then a professor friend of mine asked me to cater her whole semester of meals. So I thought, wow, this is like someone like really believing in you and saying, I want to pay you, right? So every event she had that semester at Mills College with the writers and the artists that came to visit, I catered. And every time I catered, everyone was like, who did this? And everyone was so excited and just happy to have really good home-cooked meals, right? Everything's from scratch, no bouillons, no preservatives, none of that. So she said to me one day, why don't you go and take a business class and open a restaurant? So I started the process. So I took a women's business class, made my business plan, talked to La Cocina in Oakland, in San Francisco, which is a incubator kitchen, kind of like how we were talking about a ghost kitchen the last time you and I chatted. Mm-hmm. So it's an incubator kitchen. Everybody gets their little stations. You rent your time, all of that. So I got ready to do that, and then my grandma, in her dramatic state, was like, I'm dying, come home now. So all of us took turns going home thinking, this is the end, and this was 11 years ago, and she did not pass for 8 more years. So grandma sent me back home and sort of off track. So when I came back to the U.S., I was determined. I was like, you know what? I've been gone 2 years. I just want to start this. So I started cooking on the side, cooking classes here and there. And then 2 years ago, after COVID, I was like, I'm done with higher ed. People don't respect you. You're dealing with supervisors who don't really value your time and your effort. And so I left and moved here to Cortland, and then moved the business to Ithaca, and it's just been going really, really well.
That's great. When you went back to Ghana to check up on your grandma, did you go back to California, or did you go someplace else?
So this is another funny story. So I left Ghana in May 2013. I flew to New York City, but that was the only amount of money I had. So it was a one-way ticket from Accra to New York City, and it was about $800. And that was all I had in my pocket. So I could not go to California because I did not have that extra $500-$600 to make the trip across the country. So I took the first job. I was house sitting for a friend that I had just met. I was literally living off of ramen and, just like hustling,
Yeah.
If someone invited me to cook, I would go and they'd pay me and I'd cook and then, I'd use that money for something else. So I took the first job that came across my desk, which was in Massachusetts. I went to Massachusetts, worked, catered, higher ed. So my whole work experience has been in higher ed. Colleges, doing res life, doing advising, international student work, African American studies, just a plethora of different departments in higher ed. So I went up to Massachusetts, took that job. Wasn't really the fit I needed. So I've been on the East Coast since 2013, because of that initial did not have the ticket to go back to California. So I actually have not been able to make that big, that fancy dream of opening up an African restaurant in Oakland, which was my original idea, come true. But Ithaca has just embraced me and it's made it possible here. So I've become an East Coast girl almost by necessity, but it's been a great journey. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you're here and that we got to meet, because I really like Asempe Kitchen at the market, and seeing everybody get so excited about your food is really, really cool. So I know it might be kind of a bummer, or back then it was a bummer, to not make that trip west, but I know everybody here is super grateful that you stuck around.
Yeah, I am too.
What do you find makes this area different from all of the other places that you've been? Because you've been all over Massachusetts, New York City, California, of course, Ghana too, and Chicago. Is that right?
Indiana, Notre Dame.
Okay, that's right. Yeah. So what makes this area different from all of those other places?
So I think that Ithaca is a mini Berkeley. So that's why I find it homey enough. It's just the ability to kind of just be yourself, walk everywhere if you choose to, take public transit, which might or might not be the best in the nation, but it's still there and you have access to it. The farmers market is thriving. It's not like I'm making a plug for it, but we all know it's like the place to go when you come to Ithaca, right? People are more accepting, that I found. And I feel like in general, it feels really welcoming, right? It's got its issues, and I don't live in it proper, so I can't tell you what those issues are necessarily. I've heard little stories here and there, but I think every community has those things. But it feels like Berkeley to me, and I think that's why I've been able to just kind of lay some roots down and stay, because I'm like, oh, this feels like Telegraph, walking down the commons, people busking, people asking for money, people like the balloon guy, the magic guy. So it just feels like Oakland, and it feels like Berkeley. And so I think that's why I've been able to make a home with the business and just trying to build it. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, there is that sort of small West Coast city vibe here, but also it's small enough to where you can get out of it really quick, right?
Right. Yeah. So you could travel New York City 4 hours, Binghamton 1, Syracuse, you're able to get into the bigger cities if that's what you really need. But this little enclave is it's a balloon, for lack of a better word. And sometimes balloons are good and bad. But so are most things, I think. They're pros and cons to a lot of things. Yeah.
To every place. Every place that I've been has those pros and cons for sure. Yeah. Speaking of the farmers market, what was your journey to become a vendor there? Because it is a very popular place where everybody wants to go on the weekends, especially during the summer when it's open and the weather is nice. So was it difficult to get in there? And what was that process like for anybody else kind of curious about how that works?
So initially, I moved to Cortland, and then I thought, what am I going to do to sort of move this business forward, right? So I'd been doing the little cooking classes here and there, a little catering here and there. We had done the Everson Museum events in Syracuse. And so this was my sort of researching and trying to figure out what are my options if I move to Ithaca. So the market came up. I paid a fee, I think it was $100 after I was accepted. But before that, I believe the fee was $30 to actually audition. So I had to cook the very best of everything I had. And I'm telling you, I had left my job in October. This was January. That's pretty tight, you know? So I was cooking plant-based at that point because money was tight. And all the veggies that we use in Ghana were accessible, mostly in frozen form. But that was all right. You know, it's just like you do what you got to do when you're a little tight on money, right? So I auditioned plant-based mostly as a result, but also because I thought my sisters had both gone vegan. One is now pescatarian, but I think the other one's still vegan. But because of that, I thought accessibility was really important, right? So to be able to get everybody to eat the food and feel good about it. So it's gluten-free, it's soy-free, it's dairy-free. So anybody walking the street can just grab a plate, be okay. And I always tell them, if you really must have meat, go see my Cambodian friends because they've got some yummy stuff, right? So if you really must have meat in your goosey, just grab the beef from next door, stir it all up, and it's good to go. So for me, it was about accessibility and also being on a tight budget, right? So I auditioned the food. The food committee meets once a month. So I had to wait, I think I had to wait 2 or 3 weeks to hear back. So I brought them each a bowl of food with all the different dishes I planned to serve at the market. So the market, you have to audition everything, right? So recently we just auditioned our hot sauce. I don't know if you heard about that.
Of course I did.
Right? So everything has to go through the food committee if you're going to sell it. So that was the first step. I paid the audition fee. They ate it. They loved it. It got back to me. I was accepted. So it's actually not a very heavy process. But if you audition and it's not good, that's just it. Like, that's the end of your road, unless you want to go make it better and come back again. So thankfully I got in. I paid my $100. I got into market. And then I learned that market is like a lottery, right? So you don't automatically get in unless you've been there a certain number of years. And I think it's 10 years. So you become a member, a full member, after 10 years of actually coming to market every week. And I thought, blimey, right? What am I going to do for 10 years if I can't get in every single week, right? If it's a lottery and I can't get in. So luckily for us, we got in every Saturday in April when it first opened. And then the first Saturday we couldn't get in, I freaked out because I'm like, oh my God, this means no income for this week, right? What am I going to do? So then Sunday opened up. And Sunday is also a lottery. So I went to the first Sunday market. I got in, and then let me backtrack. Before the Sunday market opened, there was an auction of any booth that was open for the summer. So I attended the auction and I won. I won the very last booth that was possible, which nobody wanted. And that was 77. And 77, I thought, was perfect. I mean, we had the 3 sides. Mm-hmm. We set up a table. We put our tablecloths down. We were able to put all our stuff on the side and just kind of create a little barrier as you were walking in. So you had to come in and come around. So we had that for the whole season last year. I was nervous again because this year we had to start over. So you don't get to keep the booth that you win. You only get to keep it for the season. So we started again this year. Luckily for us, we got 76, and so we're there. We can be there until December, and then again next year. So it'll be a third year. We're climbing towards that 10. It's going to take a while, but at least we're getting there. So
Wow, that sounds like a really complex.
It's very complex.
I mean, the way that you were describing it, looking back on it, it seems a little bit relaxing to you now. Like this is just how it is. But when you were going through it, it seems like the stakes might have been high. Like I don't know, when you were describing that, where there's this panel of judges who are going to, taste your food and decide whether or not they want you there. It kind of sounds like a TV show or something like that, like a reality cooking show or something.
Right, yeah.
Was it really nerve-wracking when you were in that moment watching people try your food?
So the most nerve-wracking thing is that you actually don't get to be there. So you can't defend yourself. You can't say, oh, that can have more salt or that can have less pepper. I wasn't there. So I dropped off the food. They ate it during their regular discerning meeting, and then they called me 2 weeks later. So I was on pins and needles for a long time because I wasn't able to be there to defend the food, right? So what I presented had to be the tip top, and that's all I had was bring it in, go away. We'll tell you what we think later. They weren't mean or anything. It was just very... this is how it's done.
How long did you have to wait?
I think I waited 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah.
Jeez.
I might have gotten a little text,
Okay.
Unofficially, that was it was great, but then I wasn't supposed to talk about that.
All right.
I might have, though. I'm not sure. I feel like you said, right now I feel relaxed and I'm talking about it, but in retrospect, it was really nerve-wracking. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, you're all calm and cool right now.
Right.
But I could imagine, it's waiting 2 weeks to hear if you actually can get into the Ithaca Farmers Market.
It was quite nerve-wracking, for sure.
But now, you're in the market on a regular basis every weekend, and you're also on the board now.
I am.
How did that happen?
So, I got encouraged to run for the board. The three of us who ran were uncontested, so we just naturally got in, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but we're there. A lot of us have experience, longer term experience. Like folks have been there the whole time, 30, 40 years. And then there's me who's been there 2 years. So for me, I wanted to make some changes about the way people got in, because I felt like that system just feels unfair. And it might have worked some 50 years ago because it was a gatekeeping situation, but I feel like there's less diversity in food, especially, right? And other, like the artisans, or maybe not so much in vegetables, because I feel like there's quite a bit in the agric. But I ran because I thought something needs to change with that 10-year requirement, right? Because people who literally walked in this year got ahead of me, even though I had 30-something markets from last year, because they were agriculture. They got first dibs. They took the booth I had last year. Love them to death, right? Right now, they're great neighbors. But it was really rough in the beginning because I thought I wanted to be in 77 again, because consistency is key, right? So I've kind of been on there trying to figure out, how do you attack some of these issues, right? Maybe not attack, but how do you tackle some of them so that it's more equitable in terms of how many people get in, how they get in, how they're supported to stay. Because all of us are small businesses, right? Nobody is there with 4 or 5 chain restaurants. Everybody is a sort of sole proprietor ownership kind of situation. And I feel like we should be supporting each other to thrive. And the system does not feel quite equitable yet. So that's really why I got on. Yeah.
And you're making steps to help have that happen.
I'm trying. I'm also probably one of the, maybe not the youngest, but one of the youngest on there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always a little, when do you know what to say? When do you say it? When do you not say it?
Right.
How do you say it so you don't piss the people who have been there longer than you? I don't want to call them the elders, but I mean, in my culture, that's what we call them, the elders. Right. People who've been there before you, longer than you. So it's a balancing act, you know, and I'm still figuring out, like, how do I make change happen if my voice isn't being heard? Can my voice be heard? Am I trying hard enough?
Yeah. You know? And, you know, it's always a slower than what you'd expect sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm feeling something similar with being in Rotary and, you know, trying to, you know, when can I speak up? When can I, you know, suggest this change over that? And it is a very slow process. Yeah. And sometimes we get a little bit impatient. Like, I mean, maybe not you. Maybe you can deal with it. But I'm like, come on, let's go. Let's do this.
Yes. I think I had one of those board meetings a couple months ago. I was like, come on. Then I was like, wait. Can I say that?
But it's valuable for you to be there and for you to have your opinion because, I mean, that's the whole reason why you were suggested for the position anyways, right? I mean, right. People must not have come up to you and said, hey, Chef Kuukua, we would really like you to be on this board if your opinion and your perspective wasn't valuable.
That's true. Thank you.
No, it's true. I mean, I think it's great. And Ithaca is a great place in Tompkins County in general for progress. So I think it's great that you're on the board.
Thank you.
So we've been talking a lot about the Ithaca Farmers Market. Mm-hmm. But I also kind of want to talk about the catering and the classes that you provide, because that's just in Tompkins County in general or statewide or nationwide. I mean, you've traveled, you've had people travel to come take classes from you. Yeah. So what is that process like with the classes? Because it seems really interesting to me.
Yeah, so my heart really, really is set on a culinary school of sorts, but not to train people to become executive chefs. Just to give your average person the courage to cook and to cook something different, right? Beyond the stir fries and the soups and stuff that people grow up with in the U.S. I think immigrant culture runs sort of beneath the U.S. culture. And so my goal is to bring it forward, right? To intermingle it with the U.S. culture so much so that any average person on the street is like, oh, yeah, I've had jollof. Oh, yeah, I've had a goosey, right? But it's not there yet. So my goal is to get to that point. But the classes are my heart because I get to sit. I get to work with whoever's there. I get to talk about home Ghana, home Ohio, which is where we immigrated to when we first came. I get to talk about the food, and then they get to talk about food and what it means to them as we're all learning, you know, the dish. So for me, market is great, but market does not provide me that one-on-one time that I have when I do a cooking class, right? So I have to be honest, it's my heart, right? So that's where my heart really lies, is with those cooking classes. Right now, they were only lessons. So we didn't have a space. So we weren't offering classes per se. They were lessons. So that meant it was one-on-one with me in my home or one-on-one with you in your home. But we just premiered the September 15th class, and it's sold out within 2 days.
Congrats.
Thanks. So we are really excited because we didn't think it was, we didn't know that there was that much of an interest. So the September 15th class is going to be 12 students, and most of the people bought singles tickets. So I'm assuming they're all coming from different places, and it's going to be exciting to learn about everybody and their food decisions, their food situations, where they came from, that kind of stuff. And it'll be held at the CCE, which is my commercial kitchen, the Cornell Cooperative Extension. So classes kind of work in that way. Like we find a space, we book the space, and then we put out an ad. Lessons, you can basically just be like, hey, Kuukua, can I learn how to cook egusi, for example, or a boom, because I would love to teach someone a boom. No one's asked yet.
I have to take you up on that. Now I know what it is.
Yes. So anything on the Ghanaian menu, on the Nigerian, maybe not so much all of Nigeria, because Nigeria is huge. But egusi, mafi, which is the peanut stew, that's what it's called in Senegal. So I love to teach people to cook. That is my love. So lessons are one-on-ones with me, and the classes are when we get a space, we book. And then, catering, as the word implies, is bringing you food. Most of the time, I don't get to interact with the folks. I just drop it off. Some say thank you. Some I never hear from again. Like, I hope it was good, because I never heard back. So, yeah, catering is available anytime, whatever your schedule is. We figure it out. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it really is bringing you food and then walking away. So it's a little different, too, from the cooking classes. What I got into when I was in Ohio was the competitions. So it's not recorded, because that's not what it was there for. But Safe Flight?
I don't think so.
The people who make windshield glass.
Okay.
So anyway, they had their corporate retreat at my commercial kitchen. And all the chefs at the commercial kitchen got together and had competitions. So each of the Safe Flight employees was teamed up with another one, and then they learned to cook a dish. So that's what I would love to bring to Ithaca.
Team building.
Yes. And it was so much fun. And it's not really about who won versus who failed, but it's more about what are you learning as you're working together in a different space, right? So it's not just your icebreaker situation. It's icebreaking within learning to cook, within learning knife skills, within not cutting yourself while you're chatting with the chef. So that's what I'd really love to bring to Ithaca if I could find the space for it.
That would be so cool and really valuable to businesses, too. I mean, they're always looking for team building exercises just to, take you out of the business itself, just to work on how to work with people.
Each other. Absolutely.
The thing that I really enjoy about the cooking classes and your one-on-one lessons is the fact that you get to share your background, your culture with the food. I mean, so much of culture comes down to the food itself, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a language that everybody knows. Mm-hmm. So you can, share your food, your culture, and have this deep conversation with somebody that you might not have ever thought you'd have a conversation with just over food, because food is so much more than food. Yeah. It's the culture.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree, because most of the time we're caught up in our little circles, right? And when you said that, I thought of this guy who came from my Airbnb experience. Full-on Trump supporter, said the N-word in my presence, but then sat down to eat and was ecstatic. I mean, there was a smile on his face. We did have a conversation about why he couldn't say that. But, it was just in the moment, I was like, ooh, this is unsafe. This is not someone I want to be with. But the minute we started talking about food, the whole thing changed. And then I was able to have a moment of education, which is it. I mean, it's tricky, right? Because everybody talks about we're not here to educate. That's not my purpose in life, is to educate average white person about race, right? So I get that. But in that moment, food became that gateway to be able to have that conversation about, because basically he was saying, you're different from the other ends, right? So he was making a compliment. He just did not realize he couldn't say that. And that was not a compliment. It was kind of a compliment in reverse, right?
Right.
But we were able to have a conversation after we ate and while we were eating, right? So for me, food bridges those gaps. He might not go away and not say it again, but that's on him. In my house, we had a conversation about why he was not allowed to say that, right? So hopefully he went away with some knowledge and some reasoning, right? But I don't know. But for me, having shared a meal with someone who on the surface I would never have bothered to interact with, but here they were, they bought a ticket. And my comfort zone was touched, and I had to extend myself as they were extending themselves, right? Because there had to be something in him that said, this is an okay place to go. And they weren't there to harm me. They just didn't know any better, right? They knew what they knew, and that was the end of it. There wasn't any sort of external education happening, right? So I think that when we were able to sit down, break bread, talk about what we were eating, talk about what was wrong with the United States in sort of the grand scheme of things, and why we were not going to have that antagonistic relationship, right? It just felt good. Like when he walked away, I felt like a whole different person. It's like, wow, these are people that in society we are definitely like, nope, not going to have a conversation with you because you don't understand, because you can't understand. And that is true to an extent. But for that one individual, right, I could have changed his world and he changed mine, because I was able to sit down and break bread with someone that I was taught to hate. I was absolutely, and for good reason, right? I'm not saying that people who are calling me the N-word are great. Right. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the people that you're taught to hate or dislike or avoid, or whatever the word may be, they eat, right? Everybody eats. Even those who are unwell have a feeding tube. Even those who are unwell have mashed up food. Babies have baby food, right? So everybody eats, and there is that bridge that we can cross, meet each other in the middle when we're eating, that's not there when we're shouting across the lines, right? So for me, that's really important.
Yeah, and you were able to make that connection through the food, and have a deeper discussion with that, the food as the foundation. And it kind of reminds me of what lots of artists, they make these paintings, they make these beautiful works to just make people stop and think. Even if it's not what they made it about, you're still thinking about something. Do you sort of see your food as like your art to, relay your perspective?
Absolutely. I see food as art. I see my food especially as a ministry. So I might look at it as art, but I see it more as a ministry, as a way to feed people, as a way to have those conversations, to bridge those gaps, and to bring people closer to understanding each other. I'm not remembering whose quote this is, but something about if the way you're understanding the world is impinging on the way my existence is, right? Then there's something wrong. But if the way you're understanding it's kind of flush up against my existence, then maybe we can have a conversation, right? So if you're saying trans rights or trans kids ought to die, different conversation, right? We might not have anything in common at all, except food, which could lead to conversation. But, I feel like at a certain point, we're all human. We're all eating. We're not all on the same page because of the way we've been given access in the U.S., right? I'm not talking about the rest of the world because I feel like that's a much bigger conversation. Even the U.S. is a bigger conversation. But I'm thinking in terms of access and how we've been given access in the U.S. to different things. And my access is different from your access, right?
Yep.
Unfortunately. But still looking at food as a ministry for me is being able to extend myself outside of what I believe, outside of the fact that I know that you're probably voting against my rights, right? And still being able to sit down with you and have a meal. That's what I see as my ministry. It's like, this is why I was put on earth, is to be able to have those conversations. Might not change your worldview, but makes you think for a minute, right?
Exactly.
So,
exactly. Yeah. And I respect you 100% for that, because that's a tough job. That's a tough job. And the fact that you do it day in and day out is 100% respectable.
Thank you.
So that was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much. I'm very interested to hear about what comes next for Asempe Kitchen.
So we just won the grant. I don't know if you knew about it.
It's been busy times for you.
It has been
grant.
busy. We won the grant.
Tompkins
Weekly.
Tompkins Chamber Member of the Week.
Got a call from Cornell University Botanic Gardens. They want to do an expose on my food, my work as a ministry.
Wow.
And a continuation of the continent. So there's a program called Seeds of Survival at Cornell Botanic Gardens right now. So they're growing everything that came aboard the enslaved ships. So all the stuff that the enslaved peoples, the African peoples, right, who came across the waters, brought with them in their pockets. So taro root, okra, eggplant, and we're talking the white eggplant, which is something that was brought over. Most people don't even know what the white eggplant looks like, but it looks like the Thai sort of light greenish, light yellow, I think it's Thai eggplant. What else? They're growing corn, which I think is a New World New World vegetable. Tomatoes, Scotch bonnets. So they're growing a lot of things that came over. And hopefully at the end of the season, so for harvest, we're gonna hopefully have like an open dinner so that everybody can have those conversations. So that's in the works.
With the food that's grown there?
With the food that's
at the gardens?
grown there, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's going to be really cool. When does that happen?
We're not sure yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's in the process.
It's in the process. Yeah. So that was a conversation we had, and I'm catering for them next week, and they want all the food that's in the garden growing right now, and I think it's wonderful. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's short term, and that's really, really cool.
Yes.
Looking forward to seeing more about that. What about long term for Asempe Kitchen?
So long term, the grant we got is from the National LGBT. So it's kind of spanning all of the LGBT community. So not necessarily just LGBT, but QIA plus National Chamber of Commerce. So this Chamber of Commerce certifies anybody who is LGBT under the umbrella who owns a business, right? So I won a $5,000 grant from them in conjunction or in collaboration with Grubhub. So that money is currently sitting in our bank account, and the conversation that happened a couple days ago was possibly a food truck. So long term, who knows, might be a food truck. That way we can touch more lives. We can travel a little bit further than we are right now. So
that would be awesome. Fingers crossed for a food truck. If you have a food truck, I'm there every day at lunch. Like, I need that okra.
Yeah, so fingers crossed. That's the starter cash. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to see everything that happens with Asempe Kitchen. Can you tell folks where they can find you online or, at the farmers market?
Sure. So you can find us at the farmers market on Sundays from 10 to 3 at the Steamboat Landing. You can find us on Tuesdays at the downtown market, which is on in DeWitt Park. And I think that's from 3 to 6. And then online at asempekitchen.com. We're all over Facebook and Instagram right now because shout out to my social media guru, Salams, who is all the way out in Oakland, but visited us a week ago to take lots of photos and lots of videos. But yeah, they're doing an amazing job. So you can find us, I think, just by Googling Asempe Kitchen right now, and we should pop up.
Awesome. I recommend everybody follow Asempe Kitchen on whatever your preferred platform is. Awesome stuff. Chef Kuukua is doing some incredible work, and I had a great time talking with you today. Thank you so much for coming out.
You're welcome, JC. It was great chatting with you, too.